Hello, and welcome to this fingraphs.com podcast on Dukascopy TV. Today we're going to talk about Bitcoin and Ethereum, which we see continuing to rise into Q1. We will start our analysis with this fingraphs.com mosaic, which includes Bitcoin, Ethereum versus Bitcoin, and the Euro-US dollar on a weekly basis on the top line and on the daily basis on the bottom line. What we can see is that the long term, the weekly basis, or the perspective over the next 2 to 4 quarters, is still uptrending for Bitcoin, for Ethereum, is leaving a base for the ratio of Ethereum versus Bitcoin, and is rising for Euro-dollar. On the daily basis, what we can see is that we've had a strong rise in Bitcoin and Ethereum, but it doesn't seem quite over yet. And on Ethereum versus Bitcoin, we're in a high-level consolidation and do expect that at some point, Ethereum could start to outperform again. Finally, Euro-US dollar is also still uptrending. Let's look at them in detail. And first at Bitcoin. This is an investor's view, so a combination of a weekly graph or the perspective over the next few quarters, a daily graph or the perspective over the next few months, and an hourly graph for the perspective over the next few weeks. All three are still in uptrends, as you can see with the three bull figurines we have here. The weekly graph, following its late 2017 top, had a cup-like consolidation. It lasted about 2 years and it has since been reaccelerating up since early this year. The risk index was oversold, which was a good base to start a new uptrend. And for now, the uptrend is still underway in our view, and possibly up to perhaps 22,000. You can't quite see it here, but up to 22,000 in terms of targets on this weekly graph, potentially into Q1. The daily graph is also uptrending. It's a bit overbought at the moment on the risk index. It reached our impulsive targets to the upside. We may see a few jitters here, a bit of dips, but we still believe that in line with the weekly graph, this is an intermediate top and we could still see higher tops into Q1. Our impulsive 2 targets we could calculate would lead us between 22 and 24,000. On the hourly graph, we could see this high-level consolidation we've been in for about 2 weeks. It may continue slightly longer. The risk index has already come down a bit, but we could still see about one more week of risk and perhaps another dip, perhaps not as deep as what we saw a week ago, and we believe that should be a further buy the dips opportunity. So still very positive on Bitcoin and looking for further entry points over the next week or so. Ethereum shows a very similar picture. The uptrend since the beginning of the year is less advanced, as you can see here, and but it is rising from a very oversold position here with our risk index. The resistance is towards 715, which is the top end of our corrective targets. We may rise until then into the first quarter, then consolidate perhaps into the spring, and then rise again to break above this resistance later on next year. If we look here at the daily graph, we've probably also made an intermediate top here. Our risk index was quite overbought. We've reached our impulsive targets. We do think it's an intermediate top. That means that following a bit more consolidation, we could see further upside into Q1. And our impulsive 2 targets to the upside, if we calculate them, lead us between 700 and 750. If we now look at the hourly, we are indeed also, as with Bitcoin, in a high-level consolidation. We may see a bit of a further dip here over the next week or so, perhaps towards the dip we saw late November, but we believe that this dip should be bought for further upside into Q1. Finally, we look at the differential between Ethereum and Bitcoin. We could see that Ethereum had been very oversold late last year, early this year versus Bitcoin. It is now in a slight uptrend, probably coming out of a base. So we are quite positive on Ethereum versus Bitcoin over the next few quarters, and probably into mid-late next year to reach the higher end of our corrective targets to the upside. That said, since September, early September, Ethereum has been consolidating versus Bitcoin. It seems like Ethereum is more growth-oriented, while Bitcoin does seem more cyclical at the moment, which means that with interest rates, which have bounced a bit, Ethereum is underperforming Bitcoin. Our scenario on interest rates is that they may push slightly lower into early Q1, but will probably not go much lower than what we have already already seen. And so we are in a high level consolidation here, probably for another month or so before Ethereum starts to accelerate versus Bitcoin again. We could also note that the risk index is quite oversold, although not quite in the oversold zone yet. So that could also justify a bit more work over the next month or so. If we look at the hourly graph, it is quite similar to both cryptocurrencies on a short-term basis, and we would see a bit of retracement, and then possibly a further upside retest into late December, and then, as we mentioned here, perhaps further work into January before Ethereum really starts to outperform. We thank you very much for your attention, and we wish you a very good week of trading.